In this video, we're just going to take a very quick look at what happens when you do a build and Maven downloads the artifacts. We're going to see in particular what happens to the local Maven Repo cache and how it gets populated. So in order to demonstrate this, first off, I'm going to take the local repo cache, which is in this directory here. And just by way of demonstration, I'm going to delete that. You can also move it as well into a different directory. But for the purposes here, I'm just going to delete it just to show you what happens when you initially install Maven and you don't have a repository cache on your system. So let's go ahead and do that. rm-fr. Okay, so we don't have that repository there. So let's just open this up in Finder and do a build at the same time. So what I'm going to do now is create a new project like I did before using the Maven archetype plugin, and what we'll see is Maven downloading the dependencies it needs, including the, in this case, the plugin dependencies for the Maven archetype plugin, downloading those in a just-in-time way to be able to service the build request that we've made. So let's just do this now. So Maven archetype generate, and bear in mind we have no repository whatsoever here, so Maven's going to have to pretty much go to the Maven central repository and download a whole heap of plugins to be able to satisfy this, and dependencies, which we'll see. First time that it's downloading the dependencies that it needs. So if we take a look in here, we'll see that it's downloaded quite a few dependencies already, which it's needed. So we'll just go and create a project and see how it downloads the rest. So at this point, it's downloaded everything that it needed to be able to use the archetype plugin. So in other words, it's downloaded the archetype plugin and all of the archetype plugins dependencies themselves. In fact, if we scan right back up, so in order to grab the archetype plugin dependency, that archetype plugin depended upon the Maven Clean plugin, for example, and so that's the first thing it downloaded. The Maven Clean plugin depended upon the parent plugin structure, which is what we see here, Maven plugins 22, and so that was downloaded, and so on and so forth, until all of the dependencies for the Maven archetype plugin have been resolved and fully downloaded and put into this cache, the local Maven Repo cache. So I'll just go ahead and create a project. Doesn't matter what I call it. Actually, in fact, there, you'll also notice that what happened then was that after I made the selection of number 6, which is the QuickType plugin, which is the QuickType archetype rather, Maven also downloaded that archetype. So we can see that Maven's fulfilling the dependencies that it needs, downloading them into the local Maven Repo cache in a just-in-time way. In other words, as it needs them. So put a group ID in here, com.zension, training, demo, artifact ID, my app, version, package is fine, and go away and create that. Okay, so at this point we have our project. Clear that out. Okay, so this is the project it's created. And the final example I'll show now is that if I now do a full build of this project, we'll see how it's going to download the plugins and dependencies that it needs to be able to do that. So if I install this, what this is going to do is compile the Java sources, the test sources, execute the tests, make a package, in other words a jar file of the project's archetype, which will be my app 1.0 snapshot.jar, and then it's going to install it into the local Maven repository itself under the group ID that we've specified. So we'd expect to find it in com.zension. So we don't have Zension here, but it'd be a com.zension.training.demo, and inside there a my app folder, which represents the artifact ID, finally 1.0 snapshot version folder, and then the actual artifact inside that. So if I execute this, we'll see what happens. So you can see Maven's building up this dependency cache as it's performing different stages of the build. So if we go up, we'll probably see, for example, the last phase here is the Maven install plugin. It requires the Maven install plugin 2.4, but it didn't have that, so it downloaded the dependencies which it required, which starts off with some Plexus utils stir for Plexus container, and then finally it's at the stage where it can actually install it. And you can see here it's installed the artifact and its accompanying POM file into the folder we expected, which is com ascension training demo. That was the group ID, remember. My app, which is the artifact ID, 10 snapshot, which is the version we've just created, and finally, last but not least, we have the jar file itself that it's created. So that should give you an idea of how Maven downloads its dependencies and caches them into its local Maven Repo cache, ready for use in subsequent builds, and that it does this in a just-in-time way, downloading dependencies and using them actually within the current build or within subsequent stages of the currently executing build. Also, the final point to reiterate is the fact that I deleted my M2 repository. So I deleted my local Maven Repo cache just by way of giving you a demonstration of how this works. This is sometimes useful if you really get into strange water with Maven. You can always delete that cache and then do a full build to repopulate the cache and get Maven to download the dependencies and start from scratch. But it's quite rare that you need to do that, but it's always an option. There's no harm in doing it, providing you still have connectivity to the repositories which the currently executing build requires. That is, those repositories which are defined in the pom.xml file, providing you have connectivity to those, then you're okay. But like I say, you shouldn't have to do this. I just did this by way of a demonstration. Anyway, that gives you a good idea of how the local Maven Repo cache works, and how it's populated in a just-in-time way and caches the artifacts locally. We'll see how to develop with Maven in the next videos, so stay tuned.